Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. I hope all of you are fine and doing good at your homes. So as you know, the situation in the whole world. So we are going to deliver online lectures to our students just to save their times. And I already delivered a lecture with the topic electrolytes. So today's topic of discussion is acid-base disorders. What is acidosis and alkalosis? And this is lecture number 10. Contents of today's discussions are, first of all, we will have an introduction with the acid-base balance. Then we will go for proton-ion concentration and how this concentration is related with pH. Then we will go for the disorders of acid-base balance, the disorders that are caused because of the disturbance in the acid-base balance. There are two main types. First is the acidosis. We will discuss it. What is acidosis in detail, and we will see the symptoms of acidosis and what are the reasons that cause this situation, that is acidosis, and then what is the compensation that takes place in our body in response to this condition, that is acidosis. Then we will move another condition, that is alkalosis, that is also caused by the disturbance of acid-base balance. We will see in detail what is alkalosis, and then we will see its symptoms, what are the reasons that cause alkalosis, and how it is compensated. Then after the detailed discussion of the acid-base disturbance, the students will be assigned a few assignments to do, and I hope after careful listening of this lecture, the students will be able to do all this. And then are the references or the books you can consult to have a detailed overview of this acid-base imbalance. And you can also go for internet to search some more details for this topic. So let's start today's lecture, that is the acid-base balance and its disturbance. So here you can see the pH papers. They are arranged in a sequence. You see, from red they are going to yellow, and then green, and then finally to blue. So this is basically, you know, the blue color. When the pH paper changes its color, it turns blue, while the neutral pH, it is yellow, and when it is acidic, it turns orange, and then red, and then pink. So this is basically, here you have the acid-base balance at this point. So how the acids and bases are, there is a balance. If you have acid and base in equal amounts, you have a balance, and you have a pH at 7, that is neutral pH. At this point the solution is neither acidic or not basic. While going towards below 7, it becomes acidic, and going above 7, it becomes basic. So this is the introduction to acid-base balance. Maintenance of internal environment inside our body is one of the vital functions, just like different other functions, for example circulation of blood, or respiration, or digestion. This maintenance of internal environment is also a vital function. Means our body itself control this maintenance of the internal environment. Maintenance of stable pH means it should be stable in our body. It shouldn't change. It also called isohydria. So maintenance of stable pH is called isohydria, is one of the basic component of the internal environment. Then some other functions that are also going side by side. The important one is isohydria, that is the maintenance of stable pH. Then is the isovolumia, As the name indicates, it is related to volume, so there should be a stable volume, means our body fluid, its volume shouldn't increase or decrease, it should be the same. Then is the osmolarity, that is related to somewhat you can say osmosis, that basically control or stabilize the tonicity of the body or the body fluid, means the ion concentration should be the same. And number 4 is isoionia, that is the stable ion composition. So these are different functions that our body has to maintain to perform proper function itself, and it is maintained by the body, and these are all vital functions. Now we go for acid base and what is pH. Basically pH is in terms of you can say calculations, it is the negative log of hydrogen ion concentration. So pH is the minus log or the negative log of hydrogen ion concentration. These brackets basically show the concentration. Basically you can say we use pH to measure the acidity or the basicity of a solution, and if the pH is 7, the solution is called to be neutral, it is neither acidic or nor basic. If the solution or the hydrogen ion concentration is high in the solution, the pH goes below 7, and here you see the pH is going below 7 and the solution become acidic. If hydrogen ion concentration is low, then pH becomes above 7 and the solution become basic. Here you see increasing basicity. So at 7 it's normal, below 7 it is acidic, and pH is low, above 7 pH is high and the solution is basic. Maintaining stable anion and cation concentration in blood plasma is denoted as isoionia. As you know, we already discussed in my previous lecture that our body fluids, they are basically containing both anions and cations, so their stable concentrations in the blood plasma is denoted as isoionia. Maintaining constant proton ion concentration is isohydria. pH is used to express the concentration of the proton. As we discussed earlier, it is the minus log or the negative log of concentration of hydrogen ions. Plasma and extracellular space concentrations of the protons are held in a very narrow physiological range, and that should be maintained. There are 40 nanomole per liter of protons in the arterial blood physiologically. This is, you can say, the normal concentration of hydrogen ion in the arterial blood, that should be maintained. pH could be easily calculated through this formula, and our physiological pH is basically 7.4, and the range that is supposed to be the normal range for pH is 7.36 to 7.44. So our body arterial blood should be in this range, that is 7.36 to 7.44. The value of pH higher than 7.44 in arteries blood is denoted as alkalemia. pH lower than 7.36 is called acidemia. So these are two different conditions that arises because of the increase or decrease in the physiological pH of in the body fluid or the blood. Extensive deviation or decrease of pH value can cause serious sequences, increase or decrease. Deviation is basically increase or decrease, so it can cause a serious consequences in our body. For example, change in protein structure. Protein structures can be changed, and most of our enzymes, they are made up of proteins. So if the pH is changed, these proteins or enzymes change their structures and they cannot perform their functions properly. The second effect is the membrane permeability. Membrane may not be able to allow the ions to go in and out of the cell, so it can affect the function of the cell as well. and electrolyte distribution, it can also be affected. Value of pH in arterial blood higher than 7.8 or lower than 6.8 are incompatible with life. So life is impossible, or you can say life is not possible if arterial blood pH is higher than 7.8 or lower than 6.8. Value mentioned above apply for only arterial blood. Okay, you should keep in mind. Value differs in different body compartments. Hence, there are different proton in concentration in different parts of or different compartments of the body. There is quite variable and lower intracellular pH value. It is about 7. That is, hydrogen ion concentration should be 100 nanomole per liter. This is for the case of intracellular pH. Intracellular pH compared to arterial pH gives the difference of 0.4, that is much high. So this, you can see the pH in our intercellular compartment is lower as compared to the arterial blood. It is acidic. This corresponds to a fact that there is 2.5 fold difference between intracellular and arterial proton ion concentration. This concentration gradient, or you can say the difference, drives, why it is important? It drives the movement of protons from the cells to the blood. Therefore, it is not surprising that venous pH and pH of intestinal fluid is lower, that is acidic, than arterial pH. That is, approximate value is 7.35. Now, all of you I think know about what are acids, but just have a brief introduction with the acids. Hydrogen containing substances which dissociate in solution to release hydrogen ions are called acids, or any ionic or molecular substance that can act as a proton donor is called acid. That there are two different types of acid depending on their strength. Strong acids, hydrochloric acid, sulfuric acid, and phosphoric acids are the examples of strong acids. They easily donate their protons in solution, while weak acids like carbonic acid or acetic acid, they do not easily donate their protons to solution. Here is the example of, you see, sulfuric acid contains 2 protons, and these are the water molecules. So they release basically these protons when they are in water. You see here are the free protons that are donated by this sulfuric acid. Now the metabolic source of acid, how the metabolism in our body produce acids. There are 2 types of acids in our body that are produced metabolically. Number 1 type is volatile acids, and their amount in our body is 20,000 milliequivalent per day. They are produced. And volatile acids, as the name indicate, they are the acids that are removed, that can be removed from the body, produced by oxidative metabolism of different aldehydes, fat, and proteins. So their metabolism produce these acids. Average 15,000 to 20,000 millimole of carbon dioxide per day. It produces acids excreted through lungs as carbon dioxide. These acids are removed from the body through the lungs as carbon dioxide. Other type of acid that are produced metabolically in our body is fixed acids. As the name indicate, they cannot be removed very easily. So their amount in our body is 1 milliequivalent, that is less than the volatile acid, that is 1 milliequivalent per kg per day. Acids that do not leave solution, once produced, they remain in the body fluid until eliminated by the kidneys. And the examples of these fixed acids present in our body is sulfuric acid, phosphoric acid, and other organic acids. There are most important fixed acids in the body are generated during catabolism of amino acids, generally oxidation of sulfhydryl group of cysteine and methionine, and through hydrolysis of phospholipids and nucleic acids. What are the bases? Any substance that is proton acceptor is base. Any ionic or molecular substance that can act as a proton acceptor is a base. There are also two types of bases, strong and weak bases. Sodium hydroxide and potassium hydroxide are the examples of strong acid because they can easily accept protons, while sodium bicarbonate, ammonia and acetate, sodium acetate, they are examples of weak bases. They do not accept proton easily. So here is sodium bicarbonate. You see it is going to accept the proton, and here it has accepted the proton from the water. Now what are buffers? The most important thing inside our body that can control the acids and the bases both. So a solution that resists sudden change in its pH has a buffering ability. It is called to have buffer ability. So the buffer is a solution of weak acids and its corresponding salt. This combination of weak acid and its corresponding salt is basically buffer. Buffer resists a change in pH when a small amount of acid or the base is added to it. By buffering mechanism, a strong acid or a base is replaced by a weaker one. So this is a proper process how the buffer perform its function and control or resist the change in acidity or basicity of a solution. And you see, here it is adding base and it is adding acid. When they are in equal amounts, equal concentrations, we have neutral point, that is pH 7, and our body perform normally. But when the pH becomes down or acids in our body becomes more as compared to bases, what happens that we lost our mind, and some type of hypertension can be the condition. And what happens if our body has more bases as compared to acid? We feel lazy and we cannot perform daily functions normally. So you see how pH is important, or the balance of acids and bases are important for proper functioning of our daily routine functions. So how body and pH, they are related. Homeostasis, or the change of pH, is tightly controlled in our body. Extracellular fluid has a pH of 7.4. Blood has a pH of 7.35 to 7.45. This is the range of the pH of the blood. Below 6.8 or above 8 pH, death occurs. Acidosis is also called acidemia. It takes place when the pH is below 7.35. Another condition, that is alkalosis, also known as alkalemia, above 7.45 pH it takes place. Here you see survival range of pH is 7.35 to 7.45. This is the survival range. pH of arterial blood range you can say is this. And alkalosis takes place when the pH becomes high as compared to this range, that is called alkalosis. And when pH becomes low as compared to this survival range, it is called acidosis. So at neutral we feel fit. As the pH become high or alkalosis takes place, we lose our mind, and you can say we are not in conscious. We become consciousness. We are not in conscious, and when we go for acidosis or the acidity increases, there is a hypertension condition. In both these conditions, we cannot perform properly our functions. pH change and how it affects. Small change in pH can cause serious disturbance in our body. Most of the enzymes perform function only with a narrow pH range. If this narrow pH range is disturbed, the enzymes cannot perform their function. Acid-base balance can also affect electrolytes. Their, you can say, concentration, intracellular and extracellular concentration is disturbed just because of the disturbance of the acid-base balance. Then it can affect membrane functions. As you know, the membranes are made up of proteins, so they alter their structures, or they can alter the protein functions. Can also affect hormones, because hormones also are made up of proteins. Then regulation of blood pH, how it is regulated. What is the system that is functioning inside our body that controls blood pH in normal range? To maintain the blood pH at 7.3 to 7.45, there are three primary systems that regulate the hydrogen ion concentration in our body fluids. And these three important systems are: number one, buffer system; number two is respiratory regulation; and number three is renal regulation. So these three primary systems, they control the blood pH. Now comes the disorders of acid-base balance. This is the response to acid-base imbalance in case of acidosis. When acidosis occurs, means if our pH of blood that decreases, this is acidosis condition, how our body respond. So this is the interactions among the carbonic acid and bicarbonate buffer system as compensatory mechanism in the regulation of plasma pH. How it works: whenever there is acidic conditions, means we have more acid in our body, what happens that the kidney secrete acid through urine and generate these bicarbonates, and these bicarbonates goes to the blood to decrease the acidity, and from bicarbonate reserve also the sodium bicarbonate is converted into this bicarbonate ion to increase the acidic basically decrease the acidic condition. And what happens, this bicarbonate ion react with the acid that are inside our blood, and it react to with this proton. Bicarbonate and proton, they react together to give carbonic acid, and this carbonic acid goes to the lungs and it is converted into carbon dioxide and water, and this carbon dioxide is removed through respiration process. That basically lowers the carbon dioxide concentration, as well as the kidney secrete hydrogen ions through urine, so it both together work, and they basically decrease the hydrogen ion concentration that has been increased and caused the acidosis. Now the next is when alkalosis occur, how our body balance it. So here you see the same interaction among the carbonic acid bicarbonate buffer system and the compensatory mechanism in regulation of blood plasma pH. So if alkalosis occur, we have more base in our body. So what happen, kidneys remove bicarbonates now, and these basically bicarbonates are removed, and bicarbonates also goes to bicarbonate reservoir as sodium bicarbonate. They are converted, bicarbonates are converted into sodium carbonate and goes to reserve. And what happens, that carbon dioxide and water together make acid, and this acid basically react with bicarbonates and takes these bicarbonates from the blood, and it goes to reservoir as well as to kidney for the removal. So this is the way the kidneys and the lungs together work to overcome the alkalosis. Then there are it is important, if acid-base balance is disturbed, how can we clinically assess? So there are different steps to the clinical assessment of the acid-base disturbance. First of all, we go for to assess pH. If it is normal 7.4, the person is not having acid-base disturbance or imbalance. If it is not 7.4, then it can be a problem. pH above 7.38 is acidemia or acidosis. Above is 7.4 is alkalemia or alkalosis. Then we go for checking the serum bicarbonate level and assess the arterial carbon dioxide pressure. Check compensatory response. Compensation never over correct the pH, means our body compensation that we discussed just now, it can never overcome the pH disturbance. If pH is less than 7.4, acidosis is the primary disorder. If the pH is above 7.4, alkalosis is the primary disorder. Then we assess the anionic gap. We will see in detail what is anionic gap. Assess the change in serum anion gap over change in bicarbonates. So we check basically this ratio. Then we assess if there is any underlying cause for this acid-base disturbance, so that we can remove that cause. So here you see this is the normal 7.4 range. Accumulation of acids or the loss of base, both of these reasons are the reasons that cause increased concentration of hydrogen ions, and the pH drops and acidosis takes place. While loss of acids or accumulation of bases, these two can be the reasons of decrease in concentration of proton concentration and rise in pH, and alkalosis occurs. So here you see a very good description of alkalosis and acidosis. Alkalosis, K, means kicking up the pH above 7.4, while acidosis, D, means the sliding down pH below 7.4. So this is acidosis and this is alkalosis. Now we will discuss acidosis in detail. Principal effect of acidosis is depression of the central nervous system through lowering in synaptic transmission, generalized weakness, deranged central nervous system function is the greatest threat. Then severe acidosis can also cause disorientation, coma, and can lead to death, while alkalosis cause overexcitability of the central nervous system and peripheral system. Numbness can take place, lightheadedness. Severe alkalosis can cause nervousness, muscle spasms, convulsions, loss of consciousness, and finally lead to death if not treated. Now the acid-base disorders are mainly classified in two categories depending on the reason. Acidosis can be metabolic acidosis, that can be due to the drop in bicarbonate ion concentrations, or it can be respiratory acidosis, and the reason of respiratory acidosis is the rise in the carbonic acid. Alkalosis also have two different types. Metabolic alkalosis, that is the reason is due to the rise in bicarbonate ion concentration, or it can be respiratory alkalosis, and the reason is the drop in carbonic acid concentration. Now acid-base imbalance. pH less than 7.35 is acidosis, pH more than 7.45 alkalosis, as we discussed earlier. Now the body response to this acid-base imbalance is called compensation. This is the natural phenomena or the natural defense system or the natural compensation that the body at once responds whenever alkalosis or acidosis takes place. So this is called compensation. Compensation sometimes itself is sufficient to bring back pH to normal limits, but sometimes it is not. While partial compensation, if range is still outside the normal range, it is called partial compensation. And normally you can say our body itself can cover this acidosis or alkalosis, but sometimes it cannot. That is why it is called partial compensation. If underlying problem is metabolic, if metabolism is the reason of this acid-base disturbance, then hyperventilation or hypoventilation can help, and this is called respiratory compensation. But if the problem is respiratory, then what happens? Renal mechanism can help, and this is called metabolic compensation. You see how respiratory and the renal mechanisms, they are working together to compensate each other. Now the clinical causes of acid-base imbalances, causes of acidosis. First we will see the respiratory acidosis. The acidosis that is caused because of the respiratory problems, and in this condition normally pH is below and down, and carbon dioxide concentration is high. So this can result, respiratory acidosis can result in hypoventilation, or it can be because of the airway obstructions, means you cannot breathe very well, and it can be chest trauma or the neuromuscular diseases, that when the person cannot breathe properly, and pulmonary edema can be the reason, and drug overdose can also be the reason. All these are the reasons that can result in respiratory acidosis. And what are the causes of metabolic acidosis, where the pH is low and bicarbonate ion concentration is also low? So diabetic ketoacidosis is one of the reason. Shocks can be the reason. Sepsis can be the reason. Diarrhea can be the reason. Renal failure can be the reasons, or salicylate overdose. Persons that are taking salicylates, its overdose can also lead to metabolic acidosis, where the pH becomes high and carbon dioxide concentration also become high. Now the causes of alkalosis. Respiratory alkalosis, where pH become high and carbon dioxide concentration becomes low. The causes can be hyperventilation, anxiety, or while we are at high altitudes. Pregnancy can be one of the reason. Fever, hypoxia, initial stages of pulmonary emboli, that is basically something has moved to the arteries of lungs and stuck them. These all results in respiratory alkalosis. While metabolic alkalosis, where pH is high and bicarbonate concentration is also high, the reasons or the causes can be loss of gastric juices. As you know, gastric juices, they contains acids, so as the acids become low, so it causes alkalosis. Or potassium wasting diuretics, the persons who are taking diuretics, it can also cause the loss of protons or the hydrogen ions, that can lead to metabolic alkalosis. Or the overuse of antacids, that can also use to alkalosis. What is ionic gap? The total concentration of cations and anion expressed as milliequivalent per liter is equal in the body fluids, mean the concentration of the acid and cations and anions, they should be equal in the body to maintain the normal pH range. This is required to maintain electric neutrality. The commonly measured electrolytes in the plasma, we already discussed in our lecture of electrolytes, that the important electrolytes are sodium, potassium, chloride and bicarbonates. Sodium and potassium together accounts for 95% of the cation, whereas chloride and bicarbonate accounts for only 86% of the anions. Hence, there is always a difference between the measured cations and the anions. It's obvious. If anions are if our cations are always higher and the anions are lower, there will be a difference always. This is due to the presence of anions, sulfates, phosphates and organic acids, and this is also due to the presence of anions, sulfates, organic acids. The anion gap is defined as the difference between the total concentration of measured cations, sodium and potassium, and that of the measured anions, that is chloride and bicarbonate. So this is the difference between the total concentration of these cations and anions is called ionic gap. The ionic gap, denoted as A negative, in fact represent the unmeasured anions in the plasma, which may be calculated as follows. For example, sodium and potassium equals to chloride and bicarbonate amounts plus this ionic gap. When we put their values, and we get finally 15 milliequivalent per liter. So this is the ionic gap that should be, you can say, in a healthy person, it is the ionic gap. So an ionic gap in a healthy individual is around 15 milliequivalent per liter, and the range is 8 to 18, that is acceptable milliequivalent per liter. What is the clinical significance of this ionic gap? It is biological tool which sometimes help in assessing acid-base problems. It is used for diagnosis of the different causes of metabolic acidosis. Here you see the disorders, the pH, hydrogen ion concentration, primary disturbance and the secondary response. If the metabolic acidosis is there, pH is always low, hydrogen ion concentration is high, and the primary disturbance is the low concentration of bicarbonate, and secondary response is the carbon dioxide partial pressure becomes low. Metabolic alkalosis, pH is high, hydrogen ion concentration is low, primary disturbance is the high concentration of bicarbonate, and partial pressure of carbon dioxide is always high. Respiratory acidosis, pH is low, hydrogen ion concentration is high, carbon dioxide partial pressure is high, and bicarbonate concentration is high. In case of respiratory alkalosis, the pH is always high, hydrogen ion concentration is low, primary disturbance is that partial pressure of carbon dioxide is low, and secondary response is the bicarbonate concentration is low. All you can see how pH, hydrogen ion, primary disturbance and secondary disturbance are discussed in this table. Now metabolic acidosis, where pH is below 7.35. When acid accumulates in the body, what happens? Or when the bicarbonate is lost from the body. These two are the conditions of acidosis. A bicarbonate deficit results and metabolic acidosis occur. You see, through kidneys bicarbonates are removed and non-carbonic acids, they are collected. So through kidney basically these bicarbonates are removed from the body. Metabolic acidosis, their symptoms and the causes. Symptoms is if someone is having headache, lethargy, low blood pressure, hyperkalemia. Hyperkalemia is basically the condition when calcium is high in our body fluids, we discussed in our previous lecture. Warm flushed skins, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, coma, and all these, if not treated, can lead to death. So these are basically, you can say, the symptoms that indicates the person can have acidosis, and the causes we already discussed can be ketoacidosis, that is the patient is diabetes mellitus, renal failure, lactic acidosis, severe diarrhea, renal tubular acidosis can be the causes. Now how this acidosis is compensated? Decrease in the pH in metabolic acidosis stimulate the respiratory compensatory mechanism and produce hyperventilation, and this leads to an increased elimination of carbon dioxide from the body and hence removal of carbonic acid. When carbonic acid is removed, acidosis is being controlled. But respiratory compensation is only short-lived. Means it is the first line of defense. Then start relent compensation, sets within 3 to 4 days, and the protons are ions are excreted as ammonium ions. Anion gap and metabolic acidosis, how they are related. Increased production and accumulation of organic acids causes an elevation in anionic gap. This type of picture is seen in metabolic acidosis associated with diabetes. Here you see the pink part is showing the anionic gap. It is in the case of normal it is 12, while in case of acidosis it becomes high, and hyperchloremic acidosis, here you see the ionic gap is this much. And this figure, the figures are the concentrations in milliequivalent per liter, or you can say millimole per liter. The pink shaded area denotes the anionic gap. In acidosis, the bicarbonate is reduced. Bicarbonates, they are reduced. You see, here they were 25 and here they are going to become less, causing an increase in ion gap. So ion gap is basically increased between potassium and bicarbonate. In hyperchloremic acidosis, where the chlorine is involved, what happens? There is no change in ionic gap. You see, is the same. An ionic gap is same, but what happens? The chlorine ion concentration that increases. Potassium levels are we discussed that potassium levels in acidosis, they are goes up. So we will see why. Potassium is the major intracellular cation, as we know. In acidosis, there is an increase in proton ion concentration in extracellular fluid compartment, that is abbreviated as ECF. This leads to what? To exchange of proton with intracellular potassium. So the net effect is increase in extracellular compartment potassium. In extracellular compartment, potassium ion concentration increases. So this is the reason. Now respiratory acidosis. It results from an increase in concentration of carbonic acid in plasma. It is due to a retention of carbon dioxide. An increase in concentration of carbonic acid is due to decrease in the alveolar ventilation, and that leads to retention of carbon dioxide. Here you see respiratory acidosis. It can work in two ways, hyper or hypo. This is the normal one. The hyper one, it's too hard, and it is basically, you can say, a type of pneumonia. Here you see in pneumonia the lungs become larger in size. So pneumonia can take place pulmonary edema or emphysema or bronchitis can take place. While in case of hypoacidosis, there is respiratory muscular paralysis, means lungs stop functioning, immobility. You can see brain stem trauma, brain feels vibrations, and over sedation, mean you feel lazy. Respiratory acidosis symptoms are breathlessness, restlessness, rapid shallow respiration, lethargy and disorientation, drowsiness, dizziness, disorientation, tremors, convulsions, coma, and if not treated they can lead to death. And the causes can be pneumonia, emphysema, asthma, chronic obstructive lung diseases, and depression of respiratory center or pulmonary edema. So now how it is compensated. increase in renal reabsorption of bicarbonates, or rise in urinary acid and ammonia. Now comes metabolic alkalosis, where pH becomes high. A rise in blood pH due to rise in the bicarbonate level of the plasma is called metabolic alkalosis. You can see it cannot control the pH. There is too much pH and lost the protons. The symptoms are restlessness followed by lethargy. You can say dysrhythmias and compensatory hypoventilation, and causes can be severe vomiting, excessive gastrointestinal suctioning, diuretics, and excessive sodium bicarbonate, confusion, nausea, vomiting, muscle cramps, and hypokalemia. In this case, hypokalemia takes place. Compensation of this metabolic alkalosis is the respiratory mechanism initiate the compensation by hypoventilation to retain carbon dioxide and hence the acid, that is carbonic acid. This is slowly taken over by renal mechanism, which excrete more bicarbonates and retains proton ion concentration in the body. Then comes respiratory alkalosis, a rise in blood pH due to decrease in concentration of carbon dioxide or carbonic acid due to hyperventilation. This is respiratory alkalosis. And the symptoms can be seizures, deep rapid breathing, hyperventilation, you can say normal or low BP, hypokalemia, lethargy, confusion, lightheadedness, nausea, vomiting, and causes can be hyperventilation, anxiety, fear, mechanical ventilation. Compensation of this respiratory alkalosis, the renal mechanism tries to compensate by increasing the urinary excretion of bicarbonate. That's simple. When these bicarbonates are removed, alkalosis can become normal, leads to normal range. Reduction of urinary ammonia formation can also lead the compensation of respiratory alkalosis. Now, after this detailed discussion of acid base, the balance and the problems that rises because of their imbalance, the students can do these assignments. Number one, what you have to do, you have to tell what is acid base imbalance and how it is measured, and then what are the reasons behind acidosis and alkalosis. And once a person has acidosis or alkalosis, how these two conditions can be treated naturally. Okay, and you have to write down the symptoms and the causes of alkalosis and acidosis. Here is a reference of a book. You can find it online. It is available. Its readable version is available. You cannot download it, but you can read the book online. So this is the reference, and here our lecture is going to end. So take care of yourself, stay at home, and just put your energies by taking these online classes, and just concentrate on your studies so that you will be ready for your exams whenever we are going to open the educational institute. So take care and goodbye. Allah Hafiz.